Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of What and Why. And I have moved. I am not in my office or on a Zoom call today. I am here with Sister Mary Rose.
Hello.
Sister, thank you first and foremost for allowing us to use your office to film, but more importantly, for coming on the show. It's great to have you today.
Thank you.
And I wanted to bring you on specifically to talk about two things today, our topics for What and Why, if you will. Care for creation and stewardship. So, if you don't know, and hopefully you do know at this point, but Sister is a Franciscan sister of the Eucharist. Sister, could you just tell us a little bit about what it means to be a Franciscan sister of the Eucharist and what some of the charisms of your order are?
So often when we think of St. Francis, we think of Francis preaching to the birds, or the Wolf of Gubbio, he convinced the wolf that, the people didn't want to hurt him, and
right.
the wolf didn't want to hurt the people. But there's so much more depth to St. Francis.
Right.
And so we look more at, he really understood that all of creation came from God. And because of that, we also are creation. And so we are brothers and sisters with the earth and with, he has the whole canticle of the creatures.
Right.
Praise you, God, for brother sun and for sister moon and mother earth. I don't think he says mother, but...
Nah, that's all right. We'll let that one slide.
But so he related with creation, and that's why he preached to the birds. Is they too are children of God.
Right.
And it wasn't in an animalistic pagan way that he reverenced creation. He reverenced it because it had vestiges of God, whereas man is made in the image of God. So there's a higher level to man because of that. And so for us as Franciscan Sisters of the Eucharist, we take that, man is higher than creation, or higher than the natural order of
flora and fauna and that sort of thing.
Because man is made in the image of God, and so we experience God in creation, but then our charism is also defending and protecting human life. And so in every work that we do, it's for the elevation of the dignity of humanity. And so you'll see our sisters working in hospice care, so the dignity of dying.
Right.
And in other medical professions, it's very obvious, treating the dignity there. But then sisters who are teachers, so teaching children and other adults about God and encountering God in even mundane things like mathematics.
Right. Or even here at St. Bridget's School, of course, we have Sister Jeanne d'Arc and formerly Sister Francesca.
Yeah. But a little less obvious one would be mental health counseling. So how are we encountering the poor and elevating human dignity? Well, we're meeting people in their pain and helping them to come to understand themselves and their relationships, and then relating to God in that way. Yeah. So in everything we do, we're working towards promoting human dignity.
Right, because what greater care for creation can there be than care for God's greatest creation, which is us, humankind, because as you said, we have that divine spark. We are made in the image and likeness of God. I love the way that you described what it means to be a Franciscan Sister of the Eucharist, Sister, because I think sometimes I have a strong personal devotion to Franciscan spirituality, and I get a little prickly sometimes when people distill St. Francis into like a cartoon character, like the guy who hangs out with the animals, and yeah, that was there, but as you said, there's so much more depth to Franciscan spirituality, and a lot of it has to do with exactly what we're here to discuss today. So, the first and foremost thing that I want to nail down is this concept of stewardship. And stewardship is the idea that you are holding and caring for something for someone else. So, we don't own the earth.
Nope.
Newsflash. If that's news to you, then come to my office. We'll have a chat. We don't own the earth. In Genesis, when God created man, he gave him dominion, is the word, over all of the creatures. But that doesn't mean that we own the earth. We are stewards of the earth, which means that we are to care for the earth for those who will come after us. It's God's gift that we are caring for to then pass on to generations and generations and generations. So, sister, this is my little nerdy bit here. I have I know we've talked about this, but humor me. Are you a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien's seminal work, The Lord of the Rings? Poquito?
I would have to say yes a lot.
Yes, sister. Yeah, I know. His sister comes into my office and we'll verge into Lord of the Rings territory quite frequently. There is one of the worst characters, I think, in Lord of the Rings is Denethor. Do you remember Denethor? Mm-hmm. Now, there's this kingdom called Gondor, and they have a line of kings. And the line of kings dries up, right? There is no more king of Gondor, and so there becomes a steward of Gondor, and it's this guy named Denethor, and he's kind of the worst, right? I mean, he's grumpy, and he's not the best father, right?
No. No.
Not very kind to his sons, and he doesn't generally do a very good job of taking care of the kingdom of Gondor for the next king who will come along to claim it. And so at one point, someone is talking to him, and they're having a bit of a disagreement, and he says, the guy who's talking to him, Gandalf, of course, the wizard, says, "You have no power here, steward," and he spits the word out. It's almost a derogatory term in that context. So, sister, can you tell us a little bit about how the concept of stewardship ties into that very Franciscan concept of minority and the lowering of oneself? Like, what is the link between those two concepts there?
Mm-hmm. I think also, another image of a steward, talk about an ancient family heirloom. So it's just something that's really precious that, maybe this was the family Bible from early 1800s, and it's got the baptismal and marriage date and confirmation date of everybody written in it.
Wow.
And so if that passes to you, you gain responsibility of it. You put it in a display case, you wrap it up and air protect it. You don't want anything to happen to it.
You're not dog-earing the pages.
You want it to go on to the next generation to continue the family history. So in the same way, the earth is our gift from God. Same with our individual human lives. We nurture it and protect it because it is a gift from God. And so out of respect and love for the giver, we give that gift great care and respect.
Absolutely.
And so that's, so we do that with the earth. We care for it. We treat it like it is very special and unique and one of a kind because it really is.
That's right.
So.
Yeah, I love that image of the family Bible. We didn't plan that, by the way. That was on the spot. I love that because you're right. I mean, if you're passed down a family heirloom like that, of course you're going to take care of it. And I think there's in terms of the earth, there's a great deal of humility that goes into this, I think, because we have the ability, if we wanted to quite literally raise the earth, essentially, kind of suck every bit of resource that we could out of it and turn it into a barren wasteland if we didn't want. I mean, we have nuclear weapons that can make entire swaths of land completely uninhabitable. Like, if we really wanted to, we could wreck the whole thing and it wouldn't take us very long. We as Catholics are called to not place things like profit that we can get from the earth over people, over the people who will come after us, or even the people who live on this earth with us now, who may be in an area that's disproportionately affected by, mining a particular mineral or, burning a particular type of fuel nearby. It's a very kind of countercultural viewpoint, I think, that Catholics have of what we are to do for the earth. And, it almost has to be said, we're verging a little bit into climate change, global warming territory here. And this is obviously an issue that has become highly politicized.
Yes.
Which is unfortunate. But the good thing is that the Catholic position is not a political position. This is what we believe as a church, and this is what we believe that Jesus handed down to us as the teachings from God the Father. So, two things I think that need to be said. Number one, we do know So, and you and I already had a discussion about this a little bit. We do know that the Earth goes through cycles of warming and cooling. Have you ever seen Ice Age, the fantastic DreamWorks movie? One of my favorite animated movies from the early 2000s. That was real, right? The Ice Age happened. Not all of the stuff in there, but the
talking sloth.
The sloth. Gotta love them. The Ice Age was real. Multiple ice ages, and obviously the Earth is warming right now. But there's also a lot of very good evidence to suggest that humankind, through our burning of fossil fuels, et cetera, has accelerated the warming of the Earth. So they're both true, right? It is true to say that the Earth warms and cools on its own, but it's also true to say that we've had some impact on that, sister. It's kind of the middle way, right? That's the Catholic way is the middle way. So it's important to keep that in mind, that we acknowledge both aspects of that, because the next step after stewardship and talking about climate change itself is, okay, what do we do about it? How do we practice care for creation? Now, I know that at the Franciscan Life Center in Meriden, you guys practice care for creation just about on a daily basis. Can you tell us about some of the things that you did, not that you did there, that you still do there?
Sure. And part of the reason that we have the land that we do is because we learn about ourselves and God in interacting with the land. So that's part of the relationship. But we also learn important principles like I had an experience this last week of shearing sheep, which is and you don't think too much about. Sheep are actually pretty easy animals to care for. They just need some grass. We grain them a couple of times a day, and we give them water. But shearing is essential for them. Because as we know, it can be almost 100 degrees in Connecticut in the summer. Now imagine you're wearing a wool coat in the summer.
Nope.
With no way to sweat or to get into the shade except, what's outside.
Sure, yeah.
So in that, I had this interesting experience and learned a little more about myself and about the sheep, but also the opportunity to provide for them in a loving and caring way so that they can be more comfortable and thrive in their little piece of the land.
That's pretty cool.
We care for sheep. We have some goats, cats, and chickens as well. But then we also have a very large garden, so that experience of living off of the land. And so the amount of effort it takes to produce the food and all the conditions and the factors that have to happen that you can't plan for, we can't control the weather. So that aspect of, okay, now we're going to live off of what we have produced. And if we come up short on corn this year, I guess we're not going to have a lot of corn this year, know. So let's see. And then the other piece that I particularly enjoy, I take care of the lawn, and so I get to spend every weekend. I get to spend every weekend mowing the lawn in the summertime. Great. And I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, that sounds awful," but it's a lot of fun.
Mowing the lawn is the best chore, and anyone who says otherwise is lying to you.
But so in that, we're creating a beautiful earth, and we're giving the lawn the care it needs. So if you let grass grow too long, it kind of gets ugly and shaggy, and then other things start to grow in it. So by trimming it, we can keep it nice, contained, and beautiful, as we all should be in our relationships with each other. Nice, contained, beautiful, caring for each other, respecting each other.
And wanting the good of each other, right? Wanting what's best for each other. I loved how you spoke about the shearing of the sheep there, because that's, a lot of people think of care for creation, and they think of these massive overarching things. And certainly, I mean, reducing carbon emissions is a good thing. We've had so many campaigns over the years of turn the lights off when you leave the room, take showers, not baths, that sort of thing. But there are also, because creation has a creator who knew what he was doing, there are opportunities for win-win scenarios. Like, sheep need to be sheared, otherwise they will overheat in the summer. Coincidentally, the shearing of the sheep also produces wool, which we can use to make clothing. So, man, it's almost like someone planned it that way. Like this. So there are certainly ways, more extreme steps that we can take to, try to slow down the rate of the warming of the planet and make sure that we are good stewards of the earth for future generations. But there are also things that it all works together. Like, we are a part of creation, and God has ways that he uses us within creation for the betterment of his other creations as well. And I think that's a really kind of helps us to zoom out a little bit and see, like, you just get a peek behind the curtain at the divine plan of how it's all woven together. And I think those moments are beautiful.
And in the encyclical Laudato Si, which I would recommend reading, and if you have questions about it, I'm happy to talk through any parts of it with anybody, so please feel free to call me or email. But Pope Francis talks about how we care for the poorest among us will demonstrate how we care for all of God's creation. And so, we can talk a lot about the environment and global warming and reducing carbon emissions and recycling and doing, and those things are good.
Right.
But we can't forget that man is also God's creation and we must care for each other.
Right.
And so that aspect of, care for creation is more than just nature.
Sure. Well, and as we said earlier, there is no greater care for creation than caring for our fellow man, because mankind is God's greatest creation, right? Deer don't have the ability to reason. A grass cannot commit a sin. Right. A beetle doesn't go to heaven. That's... So if we... I think you hit the nail right on the head. We're hypocritical if we focus on, nature and the beauty of God's creation there and ignore the beauty of God's creation down the road or, halfway across the world in areas that are disenfranchised and diverse or adversely affected by, unethical mining procedures or what have you. That's a really important fact to keep in mind. And it really shows how holistic of a view of care for creation and stewardship that the Catholic view is. People love to distill Catholic teaching down to a position on one particular issue. Like, does the Catholic Church support this pipeline or this bill or this, that, and the other thing? And the Catholic Church supports a holistic view of care for creation. And I really think that hypocritical, like I said earlier, is the only word I can think of to describe the discrepancy in between ignoring the plight of our fellow man and focusing on the green stuff, which is good, but it's not the most important, right?
Yes.
And if we care for the earth, but half of humankind dies out, then there's not much of a future generation to leave it for, right? I mean, we need to be leaving it for someone. Well, sister, I think we could sit here for another hour and a half and pick apart all of the minute issues here, but I've already taken quite a bit of your time. Are there any final thoughts that you would like to leave us with before we sign off here?
I did have one other thought that occurred to me in terms of how do we be conscientious about our own impact on the environment and on each other. And I don't know if people are familiar with the name Leah Darrow. She was formerly a supermodel on America's Next Top Model.
It's ringing a bell, yeah.
But she's now a very devout Catholic and does, she speaks at young adult events. But she wrote a paper on God as the first fashion designer. Really, it's interesting. It's very interesting to hear her talk about it. But she raised my consciousness to where do the things we buy come from? So, like, the clothing industry is very inequitable and it's very harmful to the environment. And so, if we can take the time and spend those few extra dollars, so we do the research, find out what we're buying, where it comes from, how it was made, and then to spend the few extra dollars to support a good manufacturer, somebody who's paying a living wage to the employees and not dumping the chemicals. And there are some really very tragic stories in the fashion industry and the clothing manufacturing industry of unethical practices. And so beyond just the clothing industry, but in anything we buy, where is it coming from? And can we invest? Those few dollars don't seem like a lot, but
at scale.
if all 3,500 people who, if there were a group of 3,500 and we all invested $10 extra in
Well, oh my gosh, that's
$35,000.
So I was like, oh, math.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, so we can make a big impact by doing the small things and just being conscientious of ourselves.
And even in addition to making, being a bit more discerning about where we spend our money and what companies we support. Yeah. Also, I think we really need to break free of this culture of throw out, buy new. I mean, one of the biggest things and one of the biggest climate and care for creation problems that we're going to experience over the next 10 to 15 years is over the past 10 or so years, especially with consumer electronics, cell phones, smartphones, laptops, that sort of thing. There are landfills that are piling up with usable technology, and there are tons of lithium-ion batteries in those pieces of technology that eventually are going to become a significant climate crisis. Yes. Keep that t-shirt for an extra couple of years, turn it into a pajama shirt, maybe stretch that phone use from 1.5 years until the latest iPhone comes out to 3 years, maybe stretch it a little bit longer. Any kind of holding on to things that we have until they are no longer usable, as opposed to it's just not fashionable anymore. That, again, at scale, will go a long way to preserving this gift from God for those who will come after us. Yeah. Well, I think that is as good a note as any to leave it off on. Sister, thank you so much for joining us. I think this was a really good discussion, and hope you guys enjoyed it. And we will see you right back here. Well, not here in Sister's office, but here in front of the camera next week. Have a good one.